The champagne tasted like humiliation, but I kept drinking it anyway. Standing in the corner of the Omni Hotel ballroom, watching my wife Kiera laugh at her boss Mason's jokes, I wondered when exactly I'd become invisible. The answer came faster than I expected. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mason Redden's voice boomed across the corporate gala, his perfectly capped teeth gleaming under the chandelier lights. "I'd like to make a toast to my incredible team, especially my right-hand woman Kiera Marin." My stomach clenched. Here it comes. "Her husband Keaton's still recovering from his little surgery," Mason continued, gesturing toward me with his glass. "Poor guy's been so tired lately, Kiera barely notices him at night anymore." The laughter rippled through the crowd like a wave. 300 of Austin's corporate elite, all chuckling at my expense. Kiera didn't even blush. She just smiled that practiced smile and raised her glass. "Good thing I have a work husband who keeps me busy," she said, her voice carrying perfectly across the silent room. More laughter, louder this time. I felt my face burn, but I kept my expression neutral. 20 years in the military teaches you how to take a hit without flinching, even when that hit comes from your wife of 12 years. If only humiliation burned calories, I muttered to myself, I'd be an underwear model by now. The woman next to me, some marketing director whose name I'd forgotten, leaned over with fake sympathy. "Oh, honey, she's just joking around. You know how Kiera is." Yeah, I knew exactly how Kiera was. That was the problem. I excused myself and headed for the bathroom, needing a moment to collect my thoughts. The hallway was quieter, decorated with those generic hotel paintings that cost more than my monthly salary. As I walked, I caught fragments of conversation from Kiera's circle of friends. "He's so vanilla, I'd cheat too. Did you see his face? Poor thing has no idea. Mason's such an upgrade. Rich, powerful, actually pays attention to her." I stopped walking. Actually pays attention to her. The phrase hit me like a slap. These people thought they knew our story, thought they understood what was happening. They had no clue. I pulled out my phone and opened an encrypted app I'd installed 3 months ago. My fingers moved quickly across the screen, entering a code I'd memorized but never used. Until now. "Phase 1 initiated," appeared on the screen. I smiled for the first time all evening. These people wanted to see what vanilla looked like. They were about to find out exactly who I used to be before I became Kiera's convenient, forgettable husband. Walking back into that ballroom, I felt different. Lighter. The humiliation was still there, but now it had purpose. Now it was fuel. Mason was holding court near the bar, his arm casually draped around Kiera's waist. She was laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear, her hand resting on his chest. In public, at a company event, with 300 witnesses. I approached them slowly, my phone still in my hand. "Great speech, Mason," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Really inspiring stuff about teamwork and partnership." Mason's smile faltered slightly. "Keaton, hey, feeling better? You look a little pale." "Surgery recovery's been interesting," I replied, meeting his eyes. "Amazing what you learn about people when you're stuck at home all day. Gives you time to really pay attention to details." Kiera's grip on Mason's arm tightened almost imperceptibly. I noticed. I noticed everything now. "Details?" Mason asked, trying to keep his tone light. "Oh, you know. Financial records, travel patterns, interesting correlations between corporate credit card usage and motel receipts." I paused, watching his face change. The kind of details that make for fascinating reading when you have nothing but time. The color drained from Mason's face. Kiera stepped away from him slightly, her lawyer instincts finally kicking in. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Mason said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Of course not," I agreed pleasantly. "Why would you? After all, I'm just the vanilla husband who doesn't pay attention to anything important." I turned to leave, then stopped and looked back over my shoulder. "Oh, and Mason? You might want to check your tires before you drive home tonight. Austin's got a real problem with vandalism lately." The look of panic in his eyes was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured. I walked away, leaving them both standing there, and headed for the exit. Time to remind them who I used to be. 3 months earlier, I'd been lying in a hospital bed, recovering from what the doctors called routine surgery. Nothing routine about having your appendix try to explode inside you, but I'd survived worse. What I hadn't expected was the phone call I'd overheard Kiera making from the hallway. "He'll be out of commission for weeks, Mason. This is perfect timing for the Henderson deal." Perfect timing. Not concern for her husband's health, not worry about my recovery. Perfect timing for business. And the way she'd said Mason's name, like she was tasting something sweet. That's when I'd started paying attention. Really paying attention. The corporate credit card statements were easy enough to access. Kiera had always been careless with passwords, using the same combination for everything, our wedding date and her maiden name. Romantic, right up until it became the key to uncovering her affair. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Mason Redden, CEO of Pinnacle Development, had been using company funds for some very interesting purchases. Dinners for two at expensive restaurants on nights when Kiera claimed to be working late. Hotel rooms at the Four Seasons when he was supposedly in Dallas for business meetings. And my personal favorite, a consulting fee paid to something called Executive Wellness Solutions that turned out to be a high-end escort service. I'd spent weeks building a comprehensive dossier, cross-referencing dates and locations, building an airtight case. Not for divorce court, though that would come later. For something much more satisfying. Now, standing in the hotel parking garage at midnight, I looked down at Mason's BMW and felt a surge of satisfaction. 4 slashed tires, each cut precisely to ensure a slow leak rather than an immediate blowout. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, just inconvenience them, make them think. I tucked the note under his windshield wiper. "Try writing on these, lover boy. A concerned shareholder." My phone buzzed with a text from Owen, my old army buddy who'd become a private investigator after leaving the force. "Package delivered to board members. Email blast goes out at 6 a.m. Perfect. By morning, Mason's entire board of directors would have detailed financial records showing his misuse of company funds. The escort service receipts alone would be enough to trigger an investigation. But I wasn't done. Not even close. I was walking toward my truck when I heard footsteps behind me. Kiera's voice echoed through the garage. "Keaton, what did you say to Mason?" I turned around slowly. She was still in her cocktail dress, but her composure was cracking. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, and her makeup was smudged. "I said congratulations on his promotion," I replied calmly. "Why?" "Don't play games with me. He's acting strange, paranoid. What did you do?" "Me? I'm just the vanilla husband who doesn't notice anything, remember?" I smiled. Maybe Mason's feeling guilty about something. Guilty people tend to get paranoid. She stepped closer, her eyes flashing with anger. "If you're planning something stupid, Keaton, I'm warning you. I'll call HR, file a complaint. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." "Go ahead," I said, pulling out my phone. "While you're at it, maybe explain to HR why you and your boss have been sharing hotel rooms for the past 4 months. Her face went white. "You're bluffing." I showed her the screen of my phone, scrolling through a series of photos. Kiera and Mason entering the Four Seasons together. Kiera and Mason at dinner, holding hands across the table. Kiera and Mason in the parking garage of our apartment complex, engaged in what could generously be called a passionate embrace. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you're stuck at home recovering. Gives you time to hire professionals. She lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back easily. These are just copies, sweetheart. The originals are already in very safe hands. You can't prove anything, she said, but her voice was shaking now. Can I? Hotel receipts, credit card statements, witness testimony, photographic evidence. I've got enough proof to end both your careers and Mason's marriage. That's when she played her trump card. If you try to destroy me, I'll take half of everything you own. The house, your business, your retirement accounts, I'll leave you with nothing. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud in that echoing parking garage. Kiera, honey, you really should have paid more attention to our finances. All our major assets were transferred to an irrevocable trust 3 months ago. For tax purposes, of course. The trust benefits our daughter exclusively. The look on her face was priceless. Pure shock, followed by dawning realization, followed by rage. You planned this, she said. You've been planning this for months. I learned a lot in the army, I replied. Preparation, reconnaissance, strategic thinking. But mostly I learned that when someone declares war on you, you don't surrender. You fight back. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. Speaking of fighting back, you might want to check your email. Seems like someone sent some very interesting photos to the Austin Business Journal. Anonymous tip about corporate corruption at Pinnacle Development. Kiera's phone started ringing. Then mine. Then hers again. Looks like the story's breaking, I said, walking toward my truck. Better get your statement ready. The reporters are going to have a lot of questions. I was almost to my vehicle when another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. You want dirt on your wife? Check your email. Z. Attached was a photo that made my stomach drop. Kiera and Mason in a motel room, the timestamp showing it was taken just 2 weeks ago. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was the angle of the photo, taken from inside the room. Someone else had been there. Someone else was playing this game. And they were apparently on my side. The email from Zed contained more than just photos. It contained a treasure trove of information that made my 3 months of careful investigation look like amateur hour. Text message screenshots, audio recordings, even internal company memos discussing my wife's special relationship with the CEO. But the most damaging piece was a recorded phone conversation between Kiera and Mason discussing how to handle the Keaton problem. He's getting suspicious. Kiera's voice was crystal clear through my laptop speakers. Maybe we should cool things down for a while. Relax, Mason replied. What's he going to do? File for divorce? He doesn't have the spine for a real fight. Besides, by the time our merger goes through, I'll have enough money to make any legal problems disappear. I just don't want him causing trouble at work. He's been asking questions about my travel schedule. Let him ask. Who's going to believe him? I'm a CEO, you're a senior VP. He's a washed-up soldier who runs a 2-bit security consulting business out of his garage. The contempt in Mason's voice was breathtaking, but it was Kiera's response that really stung. You're right. I don't know why I ever married him. He's so ordinary. No ambition, no vision. Just content to drift through life. I sat back in my chair, processing what I'd just heard. Ordinary. After 12 years of marriage, 2 deployments overseas, building a business from nothing, that's how she saw me. Ordinary. My phone rang. Owen's name appeared on the screen. You need to see the news, he said without preamble. Channel 8, right now. I switched on the TV just in time to catch the morning business report. Mason's photo filled the screen while the anchor spoke in serious tones. Pinnacle Development CEO Mason Redden is facing questions this morning about alleged misuse of company funds. According to documents obtained by Channel 8 News, Redden may have used corporate credit cards for personal expenses, including payments to escort services. The camera cut to footage of reporters surrounding Mason outside his office building. He looked haggard, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled. "Mr. Redden, can you comment on the allegations?" a reporter shouted. "These are baseless accusations from a disgruntled employee," Mason replied, pushing through the crowd. "I have complete confidence that a thorough investigation will vindicate me. What about the hotel receipts? The restaurant charges?" No comment. The footage cut back to the studio, where the anchor continued. "Pinnacle Development's board of directors has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Stock prices have dropped 12% in pre-market trading." I muted the TV and called the number that had sent me the photos. "Hello, Keaton?" A woman's voice answered on the first ring. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching this situation develop with great interest. You can call me Zara." The name clicked. Zara Meller, HR manager at Pinnacle Development. Kiera had mentioned her before, usually in dismissive terms. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Let's just say Mason and I have a history. He promised me the VP position that went to your wife instead. Apparently, sleeping with the boss trumps actual qualifications." Her bitterness was palpable, even over the phone. "What do you want in return?" "Nothing from you. I want Mason and Kiera to face consequences for their actions. You want revenge, I want justice. Our interests align." "What else do you have?" "Oh, Keaton. What I've shown you so far is just the appetizer. The main course is much more satisfying." She was right. Over the next hour, Zara sent me a steady stream of evidence. Internal emails showing Mason pressuring female employees for dates. Security footage of him and Kiera in compromising positions in his office. Financial records showing kickbacks from contractors. But the crown jewel was a video file labeled Board Meeting, Executive Session. I opened it and watched Mason discussing the upcoming merger with Pinnacle's board members. What he didn't know was that the merger was built on falsified environmental impact reports and bribes to city planning officials. "Jesus," I whispered. This wasn't just adultery and misuse of funds. This was fraud on a massive scale. My phone buzzed with a text from Kiera. "We need to talk. Meet me at Starbucks on 6th Street in 1 hour." I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'll be there." But first, I had some phone calls to make. The Austin Business Journal, the SEC, and the FBI's white-collar crime division all needed to hear about Mason's creative approach to corporate governance. An hour later, I sat across from my wife in a crowded coffee shop, watching her try to salvage her sinking ship. "This has gone too far, Keaton," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Mason's talking about filing harassment charges against you." "Harassment? I haven't even spoken to him since the gala. The tire slashing, the anonymous tips to reporters, the financial documents. He knows it's you." I sipped my coffee slowly. "Prove it. Don't be naive. He has resources, connections. He can make your life very difficult." "More difficult than having my wife cheat on me with her boss? More difficult than being publicly humiliated at a corporate event? I'm curious what you think difficult looks like from my perspective." She leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "Look, I made mistakes. We both did. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out." "Work what out exactly? The part where you've been sharing hotel rooms with Mason for 4 months? Or the part where you called me ordinary and spineless?" Her face went pale. "You heard that conversation?" "I heard everything, Kiera. Every conversation, every text message, every lie you told me about working late." She sat back in her chair, processing this information. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something," I said, standing up. "I spent 8 years in the army, including 2 tours in Afghanistan. I've been shot at, bombed, and betrayed by people I trusted with my life. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the level of disrespect you've shown me." "Keaton, please." "I'm not finished. You want to know what ordinary looks like? Ordinary is a man who forgives his wife's affair and tries to save his marriage. Ordinary is someone who takes the humiliation and moves on." I leaned down so only she could hear me. "But I'm not ordinary, Kiera. I'm extraordinary. and you're about to find out exactly what that means." I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her sitting there with her untouched latte and her crumbling world. My phone was already ringing with calls from reporters. The story was spreading faster than I'd anticipated. By evening, Mason's face would be on every local news broadcast, and Kiera's name would be mentioned in every article. But I was just getting started. The next morning brought a symphony of destruction that was more beautiful than any music I'd ever heard. My phone buzzed with news alerts every few minutes, each one more satisfying than the last. Pinnacle Development CEO suspended pending investigation. FBI raids corporate offices in fraud probe. Stock price plummets as scandal widens. I was reading the articles over coffee when Owen called. "You need to see Channel 8 again," he said. "They're doing a live broadcast from Pinnacle's headquarters." I turned on the TV to see Mason's wife Linda standing in front of the building, surrounded by reporters. She looked elegant and composed, every inch the wronged socialite. "I'm shocked and disappointed by my husband's alleged actions," she was saying into a forest of microphones. "I've filed for divorce and will be cooperating fully with all investigations." The reporter pressed closer. "Mrs. Redden, were you aware of your husband's relationship with Kiera Marin?" Linda's smile was ice cold. "I've been aware of my husband's various indiscretions for quite some time. I've been documenting them with the help of a private investigator. The evidence will speak for itself." Documenting them. My respect for Linda Redden went up several notches. She'd been playing the long game, just like me. The camera cut to footage of Mason leaving his house, suitcases in hand, while reporters shouted questions. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. My satisfaction was interrupted by a knock at my door. Through the window, I could see Kiera standing on my porch, still wearing yesterday's clothes. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "You look terrible." "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear right now." Her voice was hoarse, probably from crying. "Can I come in?" "This is still half your house," I said, stepping aside. "For now." She walked into our living room like she was seeing it for the first time. HR suspended me pending the investigation. They're saying I violated company policy by having a relationship with a superior. Imagine that. "Don't be smug, Keaton. This affects you too. If I lose my job, we lose my income." I almost laughed. "We? There is no we anymore, Kiera. There hasn't been for months." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been preparing for this day since I got out of the hospital. The house is paid off, the trust fund is established, and my business is doing just fine without your income." She stared at me. "You really have been planning this." "Military training. Always have an exit strategy." My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Marin, this is Detective Rodriguez with the Austin Police Department. We need to speak with you about some allegations." My stomach clenched. "What kind of allegations?" "Harassment, vandalism, corporate espionage. Can you come down to the station?" I looked at Kiera, who was watching me with barely concealed hope. "I'll be there in an hour." After I hung up, she couldn't hide her smile. "Mason filed charges, didn't he?" "Apparently." "Good. Maybe now you'll understand that actions have consequences." I walked to my home office and returned with a manila folder. "Speaking of consequences, you might want to look at these before you get too excited." She opened the folder, and her face went white. Inside were copies of her text messages with Mason, including several where they discussed ways to handle me if I became a problem. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter? The point is, if Mason wants to play the harassment card, I'm happy to show the police evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Your text messages show clear knowledge of his illegal activities." Her hands were shaking as she read through the documents. "This could send me to prison." "Yes, it could." "You'd really do that? Send your own wife to prison?" I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd loved for 12 years. This stranger who'd been living in my house and sharing my bed while planning my destruction. You stopped being my wife the moment you decided Mason was an upgrade, I said quietly. Now you're just someone who betrayed me, and I don't protect people who betray me. She dropped the folder, papers scattering across the floor. I never meant for it to go this far. Yes, you did. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just thought I'd be too ordinary to fight back. I headed for the door, then stopped. Oh, and Kiera, you might want to check the news. Seems like someone leaked security footage of you and Mason from his office. Very artistic camera work. The look of horror on her face followed me all the way to my truck. At the police station, I spent 2 hours explaining my actions to Detective Rodriguez, a tired-looking man in his 50s who seemed more interested in the fraud case than the harassment allegations. Mr. Redden claims you've been stalking him, Rodriguez said, reading from his notes. Vandalizing his property, sending threatening messages. I slashed his tires once, I admitted. Left a note. That's hardly stalking. What about the financial documents? How did you obtain those? I slid a business card across the table. Owen Mitchell, licensed private investigator. Everything he obtained was through legal means. Public records, surveillance from public areas, information provided by willing sources. Rodriguez examined the card. Willing sources? Disgruntled employees, wronged spouses, people who were tired of watching Mason Redden break the law. And the media leaks? Anonymous tips from concerned citizens. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. The detective leaned back in his chair. Mr. Marin, off the record, Mason Redden is looking at serious federal charges. The FBI has enough evidence to put him away for years. His harassment complaint looks like a desperate attempt to muddy the waters. So what happens now? Now? Now you go home and let the system work, and maybe consider staying away from Mr. Redden's property. I stood to leave, then turned back. Detective, one more thing. You might want to check into Kiera Marin's involvement in the Pinnacle fraud. I have reason to believe she was more than just a bystander. Rodriguez made a note. We'll look into it. Walking out of that police station, I felt lighter than I had in months. The system was working exactly as I'd hoped. Mason was facing federal charges, Kiera was suspended and under investigation, and I was free to continue my campaign. But as I reached my truck, I realized someone was waiting for me. Linda Redden stood by the driver's door, elegant in a way that made me understand why Mason had married her. Mr. Marin, I think we should talk. Linda Redden was even more impressive up close. Mid-40s, silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my truck. But it was her eyes that caught my attention. They were the eyes of someone who'd been planning revenge for a very long time. I wanted to thank you, she said as we sat in a quiet corner of a nearby diner. Your investigation gave me the final pieces I needed. Final pieces for what? To destroy my husband completely. She sipped her coffee with the calm precision of someone discussing the weather. I've been building a case against Mason for 3 years. Adultery, fraud, tax evasion. But I needed proof of the corporate crimes to make sure he'd lose everything. Why didn't you just divorce him? Texas is a community property state. Even with a prenup, I'd only get half. This way, with criminal charges and civil liability, I get it all. She smiled. Plus the satisfaction of watching him lose his freedom. I had to admire her thoroughness. What do you need from me? Nothing, actually. I wanted to give you something. She slid a flash drive across the table. Security footage from our house. Mason and your wife have been meeting there when I'm out of town. My stomach clenched. In your house? My bed, specifically. I had cameras installed 6 months ago. Her smile turned predatory. The footage is quite detailed. I pocketed the flash drive without looking at it. Some things you prepare yourself for mentally before viewing. There's something else, Linda continued. Mason's planning something desperate. He thinks if he can discredit you, make you look unstable, it'll cast doubt on all the evidence. What kind of something? I'm not sure. But he's been making phone calls, hiring people. Be careful, Mr. Marin. After Linda left, I sat in the diner for another hour, thinking through my next moves. Mason was getting desperate, which made him dangerous. But desperation also made people careless. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife is at the Four Seasons, room 1247. Thought you should know. Z. Zara was still feeding me information. I wondered what her endgame was, but decided it didn't matter as long as our interests aligned. I drove to the Four Seasons and positioned myself in the lobby where I could see the elevators. 20 minutes later, Kiera emerged, followed by a man I didn't recognize. Tall, expensive suit, the kind of predatory confidence that screamed lawyer. I followed them to the parking garage and managed to get close enough to hear part of their conversation. Can't prove he obtained the information illegally, the man was saying. But we can make his life difficult enough that he'll want to settle. What about the criminal charges? Kiera asked. Harassment, stalking, maybe corporate espionage if we can make it stick. Nothing that'll put him away, but enough to destroy his credibility. So that was their plan. Frame me as an unstable stalker, discredit the evidence, hope the criminal charges would overshadow Mason's crimes. It might have worked if I hadn't been recording the entire conversation. I waited until they'd driven away, then called Owen. I need you to do something for me, I said. Tonight. 3 hours later, Owen called back. It's done. Amazing what you can accomplish with a telephoto lens and patience. Did you get everything? Oh, yeah. Your wife, Mason, the lawyer, and 2 other men I didn't recognize, all meeting in Mason's house, planning what looked like a very serious conspiracy. Send the photos to Detective Rodriguez and to Channel 8. Already done, plus a few other media outlets. This story's about to get very interesting. The next morning brought a new wave of headlines, but these were different. Instead of focusing on Mason's corporate crimes, they were questioning my methods. Revenge or justice? Husband's campaign against cheating wife raises questions. When does whistleblowing become harassment? The dark side of social media justice. I was reading the articles when my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a process server holding an envelope. Keaton Marin? That's me. You're being served with a restraining order. You're required to stay at least 500 feet away from Mason Redden and Kiera Marin. I took the envelope and closed the door. Inside was a temporary restraining order, along with a lawsuit alleging harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and invasion of privacy. My phone rang immediately. Mr. Marin, this is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 8. We'd like to get your response to the restraining order. No comment, I said, hanging up. But the calls kept coming. Reporters, lawyers, even a producer from a true crime podcast. The story was spiraling beyond my control. That's when I realized Mason's strategy was working. By filing the restraining order and lawsuit, he'd shifted the narrative from his crimes to my methods. Suddenly, I was the story. I was contemplating my options when someone knocked on my door. Not the doorbell this time, but a firm, authoritative knock. I opened it to find Zara Meller standing on my porch. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made me understand why she'd been passed over for promotion. She was too smart, too threatening to someone like Mason. We need to talk, she said. I let her in, curious to finally meet my mysterious ally. The restraining order changes things, she said without preamble. Mason's trying to control the narrative, make you the villain. I noticed. But he made a mistake. The lawsuit opens him up to discovery. His lawyers will have to turn over documents, submit to depositions. It's going to expose things he'd rather keep hidden. What kind of things? Zara smiled. The kind that'll make his current problems look like parking tickets. She opened her laptop and showed me a series of financial documents. Mason's been running a side business, using Pinnacle's resources to launder money for some very unpleasant people. I stared at the screen. The numbers were staggering. How much money are we talking about? $50 million over the past 2 years. Drug money mostly, but some human trafficking proceeds. My mouth went dry. This wasn't just corporate fraud anymore, this was organized crime. Why are you showing me this? Because Mason's getting desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. He's already hired private security, people with military backgrounds, people who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. Are you saying he's planning to hurt me? I'm saying he's planning to make you disappear, permanently. The room went quiet except for the sound of my heart pounding. I'd been treating this like a game, a chess match between two intelligent opponents. But Mason was playing by different rules. What do you suggest? We end this, tonight, before he has a chance to make his move. How? Zara's smile was cold as winter. We give the media a story they'll never forget. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. At exactly 8 p.m., every major news outlet in Austin would receive a comprehensive package of evidence documenting Mason's crimes. Not just the corporate fraud, but the money laundering, the connections to organized crime, everything. But that was just the opening act. At 8:15, Linda Redden would hold a press conference outside Mason's house, surrounded by FBI agents executing a search warrant. She'd already agreed to cooperate fully with federal investigators in exchange for immunity. At 8:30, Zara would live-stream a presentation of Mason's financial crimes from Pinnacle's own conference room, using the company's equipment and official letterhead. And at 8:45, I would be standing in my own driveway, surrounded by cameras, as Mason and Kiera were arrested on federal charges. The timing had to be perfect, too early, and Mason's lawyers might find a way to suppress the evidence. Too late, and he might disappear before the authorities could act. I spent the afternoon making final preparations. Owen positioned himself across the street with a professional camera setup. Detective Rodriguez confirmed that federal agents were standing by. The media had been alerted that something big was happening, but not the specifics. At 7:45, my phone rang. Kiera's name appeared on the screen. "Keaton, we need to talk. Mason and I are coming over." "You can't. There's a restraining order." "We're willing to violate it. This is important." I almost laughed. They were walking into a trap and didn't even know it. "Fine, but make it quick." At 7:58, Mason's BMW pulled into my driveway. He got out first, followed by Kiera and two large men in expensive suits, his hired muscle. I opened the door before they could knock. "You're early." Mason pushed past me into the house. "We need to discuss terms." "Terms for what?" "Your surrender." He gestured to the two men behind him. "This has gone far enough, Keaton. You're going to call off your media campaign, withdraw your evidence, and disappear. Or what? Or things get unpleasant." I checked my watch. 8:02. The news packages would be hitting editorial desks right now. "You know what, Mason? You're right. This has gone far enough." I pulled out my phone and opened a live stream app. Within seconds, viewers started joining. 100, then 500, then 1,000. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, holding the phone so the camera captured Mason's shocked face, "I'd like you to meet Mason Redden, CEO of Pinnacle Development and my wife's lover." "What are you doing?" Kiera hissed. "I'm telling the truth, something you two have forgotten how to do." The viewer count was climbing rapidly. 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. "For the past 4 months," I continued, "these two have been conducting an affair using company resources. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is the $50 million in laundered drug money." Mason lunged for my phone, but I stepped back easily. We're live, Mason. 10,000 people are watching." One of his security men moved toward me, but stopped when Owen appeared in the doorway, holding his own camera. "Smile for the cameras, gentlemen. You're about to be famous." Outside, I could hear cars pulling up. Lots of cars. The media circus was beginning. My phone buzzed with notifications. The news packages had been delivered, and reporters were already breaking the story on social media. "You have no idea what you've done," Mason said, his face red with rage. "I know exactly what I've done. I've exposed a criminal conspiracy involving corporate fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit violence." "Violence?" Kiera looked confused. "What violence?" I smiled at her. "Ask your boyfriend about the private security team he hired to make me disappear." "Permanently?" Her face went white. "Mason, what is he talking about?" "Shut up, Kiera." But it was too late. The doubt was creeping into her eyes, the realization that she'd tied herself to a man who was far more dangerous than she'd understood. Outside, the noise was getting louder. Car doors slamming, voices shouting, the electronic whine of camera equipment. At exactly 8:45, someone knocked on my door, not the polite knock of a visitor, but the authoritative knock of law enforcement. "FBI, open up!" I looked at Mason and Kiera, both of whom looked like they might be sick. "Showtime," I said. I opened the door to find a dozen federal agents, their weapons drawn, faces grim. Behind them, I could see a crowd of reporters and neighbors, all straining to get a better view. "Mason Redden, you're under arrest for money laundering, conspiracy, and racketeering," the lead agent announced. "Kiera Marin, you're under arrest for conspiracy and aiding and abetting." As the handcuffs clicked into place, I stepped outside into the chaos of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. The live stream was still running, the viewer count now over 50,000. "Mr. Marin," a reporter shouted, "how does it feel to see your wife arrested?" I looked directly into the camera, thinking about all the humiliation, all the nights wondering what I'd done wrong, all the times I'd been called ordinary. "It feels like justice," I said. Mason was being loaded into a federal vehicle, his expensive suit wrinkled, his perfect hair disheveled. As the car door closed, our eyes met through the window. I smiled and gave him a small wave. Kiera was next, stumbling slightly as the agents guided her toward another car. She looked back at me once, her face a mixture of shock and betrayal. "You always wanted to be in the spotlight," I called out to her. "Smile for the cameras." The cars pulled away, taking my wife and her lover to face federal charges that would likely put them in prison for decades. The crowd began to disperse, but the cameras kept rolling. I stood in my driveway, watching the taillights disappear into the night, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My phone was still live streaming, the viewer count now over 100,000. Comments were flooding in, most of them supportive, some calling me a hero. I looked directly into the camera one last time. "Funny thing about surgery," I said. "Sometimes you lose a little, but you end up gaining a pair." Then I ended the stream and walked back into my house, closing the door on the old life and stepping into whatever came next. The war was over. I had won.